Good morning, everybody, and welcome out. We are doing things radically different this morning, as you probably already noticed being here. Thank you, Colin and group, for filling in. Like half our worship team is out this morning, and so, thank you guys so much for that. But if you look around, we have a lot of little faces in here this morning, and that's because we've come back from across the street with our kids ministry. And so from here on out, or at least for the next couple of months until we can get into our new space, hopefully have more information to come on that really soon. But from here on out, for the next few months anyways, I want to have you guys bring our littles into service and join us for worship. And then as soon as our worship is finished, we're going to release them. And so we're going to practice this morning. All right, guys? You guys good with that? Everybody give me a thumbs up, little guys. So kindergarten through 6th grade, we're going to do something. We're going to stand up real quiet. You guys got it? Stand up. You guys are good. There you go. Yeah, that's you. All of you guys. Stand up and see Mr. Adam back at the back waving his hand. Now, you guys are going to walk over, and you are going to meet Adam, and he's going to walk you guys back. Now, here's the deal. Mom and Dad, if you're new with us and you have kids that would be in our kids program, then we would love to welcome you to go back and get them signed in and meet our kids crew, kind of check it out back there. So we realize that this is your first Sunday. This is totally weird and different from what we normally do. But yeah, you guys meet Mr. Adam back at the back. Give you guys a few seconds to do that, and he will walk y'all back to our kids area. So yeah, pardon the awkward silence here for a few seconds while we get this figured out. So that's like the really good thing about being a smaller church, and like it's kind of intimate, so you can listen to them, kind of stomp their way back there, and that's totally cool here. Actually, I love it. Anybody hear them last week back there up front? Yeah, a few people. I can totally hear them. But man, I love that. Actually, for me, that's a sign of like a healthy and growing church, that we've got a lot of kid noises coming from the front. So man, just let's embrace that, and it'll be great. So, all right, I think that has got most of our littles taken care of. And so again, next week you guys will come and drop them off. You keep them with you, and then as soon as song service is over with, they can just go ahead and make the way around the corner, and Adam will be waiting, or whoever's running our kids program will be waiting for them. All right, so I got a couple announcements, and then I'm going to pray, and we'll get right into our service for this morning. One, we have Refuge this week, so teenagers, 6th through 12th grade, 5:45 this Wednesday night. We are kicking off a new series, which is called... Can't remember. So it's called something, and it's kicking off 5:45 this week. So probably my bad. I should have totally looked at that. So sorry to put you on the spot, man. But anyway, so 5:45 to 7 o'clock this week, we're having Refuge. Our women's ministry is going to be kicking back up again this week, 6:30 on Tuesday night. They're starting a new series as well. Didn't check what that was either. Nehemiah, yeah. I actually heard really good things about it too from people that are already, Danielle's already been into it and said it's really awesome. So kicking off Nehemiah this week, 6:30. If you haven't gotten the book, don't stress, show up and we'll get you hooked up with the resources you need to do that. And then finally, our kids play. Well, not finally, but our kids play. Renee is going to be back at the back, and Lily at the end of services. So we're going to do a kids play again this year for Easter. If you were here last year with us for Easter, then that was super awesome. And our kids kind of ran the show on Easter Sunday, man, and did a phenomenal job putting on a play. And they're going to do that again. And play practice is going to be getting started again soon. So sign up if you haven't already, and your kids want to be a part of that. Then sign them up in the back with Lily after that. Now, all right, so all that stuff's out of the way. I want you guys to do something with me. We're all going to pull out our cell phones. So everybody pull out your cell phone and show it to me real quick. All right, here's the deal. There's been a majorly lacking thing here at the Outpost, and it has been our communication plan, and it's kind of been jumbled up. It's hard. Not everybody is in our church management software. Not everyone is connected to our email services, and so we've got this new texting service. So everybody pull it out and open up your messages. I'm going to wait while we do that. So everybody pull it out, open up your messages, and then type in the number 94,000 as a new message, 94000. Everybody do this for me. 94000. Everybody good with that? All right, go down to the body of that text message and then type in connect OP. CONNECTOP, all one word. I don't think it matters what case it's in. Doesn't matter what case it's in, so it can be all uppercase or lowercase, whatever. Connect OP and then hit send. Did you get something back? Did you get something back? Okay, there's a little blue link there. Click on that blue link. Very good. A blue link. Did you get something back? Oh, you're done. Perfect. Yeah. So first name, last name, and email address. It's going to tell you thanks whenever you're done with that. I'll wait for you. You guys let me know. What this is going to allow us to do is we're going to be able to send messages out, and I promise you, we're not going to like inundate you with a bunch of stuff because I hate getting a bunch of email or I hate getting a bunch of text messages throughout the week from some service or something like that. And at any point in the journey that you want to like stop getting text messages, all you have to do is write stop and hit send to that number, and you'll stop getting the text messages, right? But what this allows us to do is say tomorrow morning, about, 8, 9 o'clock, you're going to get a text message that says, hey, how can we be praying for you this week? It's your chance, and you can respond back to that. And not everybody's going to see it. Just our pastoral staff here at the church will see that. Man, let us know. Shoot us a text. How can we be praying for you guys this week? And then we will... We'll take that information, either give it out to our prayer team, or we will pray within just our pastoral staff as well. But another thing that you can do with this, and so if you're one of our ladies that is interested in knowing about If Gathering this year, which is going to be in March, if you're interested in attending that, or you haven't signed up for that, or whatever the case is, go back to that text message and type If 2022, all one word, IF 2022, and hit send. And what that will do is that will enroll you in our if text messages. And so they're going to, here in a few days, they'll send out a text message that says, hey, if you haven't already registered, click this link. And you can go and you can click that and it will send you the registration page, or it'll be like graphics or invitational things, or maybe a countdown to how many days until If Gathering. So a few things like that we will be sending out over the coming weeks leading up to If Gathering. And so we'll have different things. Our men's group, we missed some guys at our men's meeting this last night. And that's totally my bad. I take full responsibility for that, because the deal is not everyone has social media. Not everybody is connected to our emails. And so this way, we can slot all of our men in one, and all of our ladies, all of our parents of kids, or parents of teenagers. And if we want to communicate within the church, this is going to make things really, really easy. And it gives you the ability to text us back and to get that. And you can text that number at any point for any reason, and we will get that and we will see that. So, I will at least. And so that's who has it. Me and Adam right now, and Peyton have access to that. But other than that, it'll be private, and you guys can send stuff in. Everybody good with that? Everybody good? Okay. That was a lot. And so I appreciate you guys doing that. I really do. That will really help us get information out, and so that people aren't missed in the communication train that's going on here at the church. So I think that's it for announcements. And so I just want to pray as we get ready to launch into our sermon for this morning. Let me pray with me. Father God, we love you and praise you. We just thank you for another amazing week. Father, we just thank you for this beautiful weather that we had yesterday and again today. God, I just pray that we would go out and we would see your beauty all in creation that you've put here to just draw our eyes back to you. Father, we thank you for your Son. We thank you for the gospel. We thank you for the way that it transforms our lives and our futures. I just pray that you would allow all distractions to just melt away in this moment as we would come. Father, open our hearts and our ears and our minds up to what your word is trying to tell us this morning. Jesus, we love you and we praise you, and it's your name we pray all these things. Amen. All right, so we are in the Book of Deuteronomy this morning. You guys, how are you guys doing on Bible reading plan? Anybody I'm just totally falling behind? Anybody will raise it up? What's behind? A day or two, or a week or two? Well, you should be in Numbers, right? I don't think y'all start Deuteronomy. Beginning of Numbers? Okay. It's a few days behind. That's fine. Yeah, so here's the deal, and I say this every Sunday, that isn't to make you feel like a failure or some sort of thing like that. If you haven't even started the Bible reading plan, that's not a big deal. Just pick up with where we are. Let me know if you want one of the Bible reading plans. I'll get it to you, and just pick up with where we're at. Go back and highlight the things that you've missed. I promise you we will have more than enough time before the end of the year to catch up and do all of that, right? And so, or if you're behind and it's within catch-up distance, then just, hey man, put it on in the car next time you're there and listen to it. The YouVersion Bible app is an incredible way to do that. You can pick out whatever version you want and then just hit play, and it'll keep you going, right? So that's about reading. So I want to start this morning by asking a question. What makes for a good story? What makes for a good story? A happy ending? Like things resolve nicely at the end? Okay. All right. I don't know, man. I kind of like a cliffhanger. Anybody like a cliffhanger in here? All right. So for some people, it's a happy and neat and tidy ending, and some people it's cliff. What else? What else? What makes a good movie, story, book, whatever, comic? I don't. What's that? What's that? Okay, like the thing that pulls you in, like something that like gets you invested pretty quickly into the story. I'm with you on that. I actually don't like stories that like drag out and take a long time to really kind of get off the ground. What else? What else? What makes a good story? What makes a good comedy? You like comedy? Who likes comedy in their stories? Anybody don't like? I would rather not. Anybody that's just like I'm not a big fan of comedy or it like doesn't appeal to me. Okay, couple people. So yeah. Here's the deal. Here's why I asked this. I think there's 1,000 different things that can make a good story. For some people, it's the happy, resolved ending. Maybe it's a love story. And here's the deal. Who's into the love story thing? Oh, yeah. Who's not into the love story thing? Okay, yeah, that's me. I could care less if it had any of those elements in it, right? Like that's not a big deal for me. And so I think it's a different thing for everybody in some senses. But then as I've thought about this week, there's been a few things that sticks out that I think make a good story like universally, right? I think there's a couple of things that if a story has at least these two things, then it will qualify as a good, and then all the rest is up for grabs, right? And I think number one is the stories that invite us to see ourselves in them are the most captivating, right? The stories that are like done in such a way that you see yourself in it. Maybe it's themes, or maybe it's like common life struggles or things like this, and it pulls you in. And maybe like the best ones, like you get to the end of the story and you're like, holy smokes, that was like about like my life, or that was about something that I've been through or something like that. And it was maybe veiled behind some crafty or neat narrative or something like that. But the stories that pull us in, that's number one. But I think number two, the best stories, the stories that really like qualify as good stories, are the stories that share deep life truths and move us to change. Move us to change not just in like bad ways, but move us to change for the better as they weave those themes sort of subtly under the surface. You guys know what I'm talking about? Who's seen Cars in here? Have you seen Cars? If you like have kids under the age of 18 or grandkids, like pretty much everybody in here should have seen Disney and Pixar's Cars movies, right? And so I actually used to love watching the Cars movies, and it's like of all the movies, like anybody's kids like to just watch it and then watch it again and then again and then again and again, right? And it's just like, dude, that was my kids. It was like, all right, it's the 15th time we've seen Elsa this week, right? So let's shift to something else. And so, but I actually didn't mind watching the Cars movies because they did a really good job of weaving these sort of really adult themes in there. Like Cars 1 was about like, what is the thing that's most valuable in life? Is it the maybe the financial? Is it success? Is it winning? Or is it the relationships that actually change us over time? And they explain that in some really like big ways. You obviously got Mater, who's the exact opposite of Lightning McQueen, right? In every way, shape, or form, his value system, the things that he likes, and then you have like my favorite two is the hippie bus that runs on some kind of questionable fuel. You know what I'm talking about? And then you got Sarge, and they're like right next to each other, and like, bro, these two guys should not exist, and yet like they're all this one sort of community. So it's weaving this story about like the reality of deep community and how we're shaped by that. That's like a big deal. That's a big theme. Cars 2, man, Cars 2 is really adult because it says that actually it's not one or the other of those things. That's not real life. Real life is that you have to balance both of those things. The pursuit of like maybe wealth or whatever, success, has to be like tempered by your pursuit of friendship. And you can't just be with your friends all the time. No, because why? You got to go to work someday. And there's tension in this, right? And it's how like we're sort of tempted to drift apart. And then Cars 3, man, it just goes off the deep end. It talks about things like legacy. Man, stuff that people don't really start considering till they're in their 50s and 60s a lot of times. And it's talking about some incredibly adult, deep themes of like how do I let go? I've been the doer my entire life. How do I let go to be the one who cheers someone else on or leads somebody else? And it's like, bro, these things are deep, like really meaningful, life-changing stories. And those are the ones that really suck us in. Now, here's the deal. I didn't give you that because I wanted to give like movie recommendations. Everybody's seen Cars, right? And we're not like starting a film critics class. So why in the world did I tell you about that? We've been in the Torah Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and we're going to close out in Deuteronomy this week. So we've been in 6 weeks. I think this makes week 7 for us in the Torah. And man, it is doing some things that really line up with this view of good storytelling, right? But we have to remember a couple things. One, we said that Torah means law, right? And the law is showing us how to live a life in right relationship with God and our fellow man. Here's why I brought up Lightning McQueen for just a second, right? We may be tempted to only see the explicit commands of the law, right? You may think of a few of those. How about the Big 10, right? Don't murder, that's bad, or don't commit adultery, or don't have any other gods before me, or maybe some of the ritual stuff. Here's how you make sacrifices, or here's what you do with social justice. And in fact, there's a lot in the Torah. There's 613 different commands given in the Torah. And so what we can be tempted to do is when we hear the word law, we can be tempted to hear thou shalt blank. You guys tracking? You know what I'm saying? But that's not it. Actually, man, by the time we're done with this, we will have read nearly 288 pages, and in that, we will have read poetry, narrative, history, prophecy. We will have seen over 36 different character arcs come and go, right? We met Abraham, we met his dad, and Abraham was born and lived and died, and we've seen his entire character arc, and something was being like communicated through that. And we get like over 36 of those. We get a lot of those. 2,000 years of history. Y'all, empires rose and fall in that period of time, right? Over 40 different self-contained units of narrative that are each one like communicating their own truth. All of that is law. So here's the deal. If I ask my kid, if you like growing up, you ask Jack what Lightning McQueen or what Cars is about, he would have said it's about Lightning McQueen and Mater, right? Was he wrong? No, he's not wrong, right? It just doesn't hit the deep things that's like actually going on in the book. And my fear is that if, like for us, law equates to thou shalt not or thou shalt do these things, right? Like if that's what we think of when we read through the New Testament, for instance, we hear Paul talk about the law or Jesus as he refers back to the law. And in our minds, we can really be tempted to just see this list of rules. And if we see it that way, then we've like really, really missed some incredible things, because the law is the culmination of all of the stories, commands, characters, the rituals, genealogies, and the images of who God is and who we are. That's right, man. That means all those long genealogies that we typically like to skip over. It's part of the law, right? That means the creation account in Genesis 1 is part of God's law, as it is revealing who God is and who we are in light of that. That means the architectural instructions. Things, you remember that in the book of Exodus, where it's like for like 14 chapters, it gives you like repeated over and over and over again details about how to build this tent. And you're thinking, what in the world? Like, how in the world is that part of like my daily life, or what does that mean for me? It's like, here's the deal. That's part of the law. But you just can't think about it as only these commands, because that misses the larger sections of what God was communicating through the Torah's 5 amazing and unique books, right? Everybody's tracking. You guys get with me? That's going to be a big deal, because I think if you grew up like me, when you heard law, you heard like 10 commandments. Anybody? That was you? Like, I hear the word law, or it talks about, Paul in the New Testament, other New Testament writers, or Jesus, whoever refers back to the law. That's immediately what sort of comes to my mind. And yet, that's not just the law. It's all of these things sort of working together to show us how we live in relationship with this God who loves us and who created us, and how to live in right relationship with the rest of the world and our fellow man who's around us, right? And here's how the book of Deuteronomy sort of ties into this. The book of Deuteronomy is Moses' final instructions to the children of Israel, showing them how to live faithfully in the land of promise. You guys want to learn a little Hebrew this morning? Everybody say Davarim. Say Davarim. Davarim, right? Davarim. Davarim is the book's name in the Hebrew Bible, and it stands for these are the words of. Right? These are the words of it. This is Moses' final instructions. And so these are the words of Moses that he's going to give to the children of Israel before they cross into the promised land. And I think that's good because it is. That is absolutely the words of Moses. But I think it sort of misses the heart of what the law is. I think the Greek translation of that gets us a little better. So in Greek, the word is Deuteronomy. It comes from the Greek language. And translated literally, it means second law. Second law, if you're taking notes. Now, this should not be understood as a second set of commands. That's not what Deuteronomy is. So much as it is actually just a restatement and an expansion on the previous commands given to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. So we know this from the story where we've been so far, is they come out of Egypt and they spend a year there at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God gives them this law, right? Gives them these explicit commands that fall within the larger section of the law as narrative. And so he gives them these things, and then they wander, they rebel, and they wander around the wilderness for 40 years. Now they've this whole generation has died off, and they've come at the plains of Moab. This is where they're standing at when we pick up with the story this morning, ready to cross into the promised land, right? And so they're there, and Moses says, hey, wait, I need to give you this new generation. I want to give you some commands. In light of the fact that you're about to go into the land. We're going to see it this morning. He expands on some things. He's given us laws about idolatry, but now he gives us laws in light of the cities that they're going to live in, and how they're going to perpetuate justice, and how they're going to administrate I don't know, the purity laws or worship and all this stuff in light of living in the city, right? So in the first 11 chapters, Moses communicates the law by retelling Israel's story. Moses got this fact. In fact, Moses knew well that the law wasn't just this list of 613 commands, because the first 11 chapters, as he communicates and restates the law to this new generation coming into the land, he does it by retelling their story. Where they came from, out of Egypt, how God rescued them, how he led them through the wilderness, what he was doing through the manna, and how he was testing them through giving them water or not giving them water at certain times, right? And so as we close down this section on the Torah, and we get ready next week, we're going to pick up in Joshua, and we're going to make our way through all of the historical books. And so if you haven't been with us since we started this, we're actually going through the entire Bible over this year in a series called Cover to Cover, and we just closed out our first section of the Torah. We're going to this morning, and we're going to pick up next week with the story of Joshua, man, and it just gets even crazier from here on out. So here's my thoughts: is I want to recap where we've been over the Torah. I want to recap the law, and then we'll see how Deuteronomy fits in place of this. You guys good with that? Everybody good? Doing all right? All right, thumbs up. Okay, sounds good. Here we go. Weeks 1 and 2, we covered the book of Genesis. We said that Genesis is basically two books in one. We got 1 through 11, and it's completely different from 12 through 50. You have these two different sections, and they're linked together in this awesome way, and we looked at that. Go back and check out that sermon series, those two sermons if you missed them. We said Genesis 1 through 11, we meet the creator of the universe, right? We said this story is not trying to communicate how things got here nearly as much as it's trying to tell us a few things about the one who put it all here, right? And we meet this God who is capable of creating everything with just the words of his mouth. And he creates these spaces, right? Days 1, 2, and 3. God creates these spaces. It's heaven and earth, it's sea and land, right? And then he gives these things laws that will govern these spaces. He says it's good, right? And when these laws work as they're supposed to, things are good, and if they don't, then life can't exist. Then he goes on, I'll show you what I mean. He goes on later days to fill those spaces with things that will abide by those laws. So he creates heaven and earth. That's day 1, but day 4, he then creates sun, moon, and stars to fill that space and to abide by those laws for which he's created. And when they abide by those laws, he calls them good, and life can flourish and can function, right? So what happens if the sun, moon, and stars doesn't abide by what God has called? What if they don't abide by the laws, right? What if the moon just went spinning off into space, or the earth went hurtling into the sun, right? It's well, it would make life on this planet incredibly difficult, wouldn't it, right? And so, but everything does. Everything abides by these rules until it gets to mankind, and he's created this whole space to fit us, and he puts us in here, and he says, hey, follow my definitions of good and evil, evil, and you will live and find life in my presence. And what do? We're like, nah, I don't think so, actually. I'm going to do things my own way. And what happens? Dude, like, we find ourselves outside of God's presence and outside of life, right? And so in the first 11 chapters of Genesis, we're meant to see the consequences of mankind's rebellion against his Creator. Right? The fall happens in chapter 3, and then chapters 4 through 11 is just this constant, this downward spiral that shows like what the consequences of us defining good and evil for ourselves looks like on a personal scale, but then on a like national and even a global scale, like what happens when mankind defines good and evil for himself, right? The second part of Genesis details the beginning of the redemption story. The good news of the Bible is that God didn't leave us in that. Like nothing we could do could like lift ourselves out of this place we had doomed ourselves to. And so God comes in, not because of anything we've done. In fact, we continue to fail. God picks these like guys, and we meet this guy like Abraham, and maybe we think like something's special about him, but literally 7 verses after we meet Abraham, he's a mess up, man. He's a dud, just like everybody else who's come before him. And so you get this picture that like, actually, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with Abraham. Maybe he's not any smarter or any more special or anything, anything standing out about Abraham that would would cause God to choose him. He just chose Abraham because of who he is, his own mercy and his own grace. And he uses these messed up people. Genesis 12 through 50, we see God use flawed characters to move his plan of redemption forward in spite of their constant failure. That's Genesis, right? The book of Exodus opens with a picture of mankind in exile. We are far from the land of promise, and yet this does not stop God's redemptive plan from moving forward. Exodus gives us the prototype of how redemption works, as God saves his people from slavery. I said that we got a lot of ideas about what redemption means. It's definitely a churchy word. It's not one that we use in like our common vernacular very often. But in the Bible, in the biblical sort of imagination around the word redemption was definitely tied to the liberation of slaves. And when we understand redemption from that perspective, man, it like the whole rest of the story comes into focus, right? It's awesome. So God is not only saving his people from the consequences of their rebellion pictured in the archetype of Egypt, but he is also saving people from the source of their sin. That's the rebellious nature that exists in our own hearts. I told you that Exodus is this 2-part act, right? 1 through 18, God is redeeming the people out of Egypt, but they're still not free. Like God has to save them from themselves, and that's what the rest of the book is about. And like he saves us from ourselves as we learn to trust in him instead of our own definitions of good and evil. And he's given us these laws, these commands, even this like physical space where we can come into and can experience the goodness and blessing and life of God's presence. That's what Exodus is doing. The book of Leviticus then presents us with the problem that has existed since mankind was kicked out of the garden. And it's this, man. Much like a snowball can't exist on the surface of the sun, sinful humanity can't exist in the presence of an infinitely holy God. And yet, God has brought us out and desires for us to be with him, and there's this problem. We come to the end of the book of Exodus. They build this tabernacle, and they go through all of these like steps to do this, and it's this big thing. And Moses, like the guy who has led them out, like Moses, the one who talked face to face with God on Mount Sinai and received the law, tries to walk in, and he's like, boom, he can't go in. So the question that like we're left with at the end of Exodus is like, dude, how do we come into God's presence? And then Leviticus goes on to systematically answer that for us. This is how we exist in God's presence. Leviticus is showing us how to come into the presence of God to find forgiveness from our rebellion in life. We should understand the book of Leviticus is a book of theory, right? It shows us how to live in God's presence theoretically. The next book in the Torah, Numbers, is like the practicum, right? It's like what does this look like to live out practically? Learning obedience to God's law is a process. So God gives us this picture. I told you guys, man, there's nothing that sticks with you more than a bad road trip, right? You guys remember, I shared the story of my like terrible road trip. And when things go bad on a road trip, it's like those lessons, they stick with you. And I said there's a couple of types of people. There's the people that can touch the stove, or that have to touch the stove to like know that it's hot. And then there's the people that can watch other people touch the stove and know that it's hot, right? And I asked you guys to raise your hand. We had a pretty even split last week, man, about people like, thanks for being honest about that, by the way. I said I wasn't going to tell you which one of those categories I fell in. But the book of Numbers is here about this, like, this generation of people that touched the stove over and over again and found out that it was hot. And then there's a generation that watched them do it. And the book of Numbers ends in this road trip as we wonder, what is this next generation going to do? What are they going to do? Like, they've watched an entire generation touch the stove and die in the wilderness because the stove was so hot, in fact, that like, dude, what are they going to do? And that's what Numbers ends with. It ends with this road trip. And we're meant to take from, here, let me stick with my notes, right? Numbers is showing us how God uses the journey of life and the various trials we encounter to shape us into a people of faithfulness and obedience. You guys doing good? All right? It's a lot. We're covering like 7 weeks of information in like 10 minutes, right? This brings us to the book of Deuteronomy, where God is putting all of these lessons learned. He's taking this whole law and he's going to restate it. And then at the end of it, actually, it's towards the beginning of the book, he's going to package it all together nice and neat and tidy for us to like this one memorable, life-changing sentence that's like, if you can do this, you get the law. If you can follow this, if you can grasp this concept, then not only will you know the law, but you will follow the law, right? And this is what Deuteronomy is going to do. And to see that, we got to go through our story overview, right? So, story overview. Deuteronomy 1 through 11, I told you guys, gives an overview of Israel's journey and show how God was teaching his people to love and obey him that they might find life. Here's an excerpt. I'm just going to read an excerpt. I think it's probably the easiest way. Just let the Bible explain itself. Deuteronomy chapter 8, we'll pick up in verse 1. It says, all the commandments that I'm commanding you today, you should be careful to do. This law, right? And why? Because if you do them, you will live and multiply and go in and possess the land which the Lord swore to give to your forefathers. You shall remember all the ways which the Lord your God has led you in the wilderness these 40 years. I want you to think back to what this journey has been to you, how it has formed you, right? That he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He humbled you and let you be hungry and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by everything that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. Yeah, we should get this as we've tracked the story. It's not bread. Bread's not hard for God. God can do bread really easy, right? God says, actually, I'm going to give you bread every day. I want to know if you will trust me in what I say. So, hey, don't gather too much, or it's going to rot. It's going to turn nasty in your tent, right? Do you trust me? Will you trust what I have to say? And hey, on the 6th day, I need you to gather twice as much. And I know it rots every other day, right? But I need you to gather twice as much today because I need to know if you trust me in what I say. Bread is easy. But man does not live by bread alone. Man lives by every word that comes out of God's mouth, right? Your clothing, it did not wear out, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. Thus you are now in the heart. Thus you are now to know in your heart that the Lord your God was disciplining you just as a man disciplines his son. Do you discipline somebody that you don't love? Anybody like know those people that like to discipline other people's kids? You know those people? Yeah. We won't go into it, but that's not a good thing, right? One, because like maybe you love my kid, but I don't know that like the discipline is coming from the best place in your heart. Actually, man, discipline is one of the highest expressions of love that there is, man. You discipline people that you love. And not just like giving a whooping to somebody, right? That's not all that discipline is. Actually, man, like you can discipline your mind, you can discipline your body, and it takes repetitive like stress and exercise in these things over time. And this is what God was doing. This is the whole road trip analogy that God was using through the book of Numbers. It was discipline over and over and over again. God was driving in these lessons to his people, right? So here's why. Here's why all of this had to happen. Because the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks, of water, of fountains and springs flowing forth in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive and honey, a land where you will eat food without scarcity, in which you will not lack anything. A land whose stones are iron and out of whose hills you will dig copper. When you have eaten and are satisfied, you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. But beware. Because man, just as much as we are capable of forgetting God and his goodness and his blessing in the wilderness, right? We things don't work out to plan in these wilderness moments of our life, and what do we immediately do? I'm a fixer, right? So it's so I'm going to maybe I pray about it, and I kind of give my cursory, all right, God, I'm turning this over to you. And then I immediately go into this place where I'm trying to fix it myself, and I'm trying to come up with solutions or whatever to fix the problem, and I go into freak out mode sometimes, right? But just as likely as we're to do that, he's about to give us another kind of beware moment. Here's what he says. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his ordinances and his statutes which I am commanding you today. Otherwise, when you have eaten and are satisfied and have built good houses and lived in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply and your silver and gold multiply, and when all that you have multiplies, then your heart will become proud and you will forget the Lord your God who brought you out from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. No, man, he led you through the great and terrible wilderness with fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water. He brought water out of the rock of flint for you, right? In the wilderness, he fed you manna which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you, that you might test you to do good for you in the end. Otherwise, if you forget God when things are going well, you may say in your heart, right, my power and the strength of my hand made me this wealth. Oh man, is that true? Is that who brought them into the land? Is that who gave them that land? Is that who threw down the gauntlet with Pharaoh and brought them out of Egypt? Was it their own strength? No, man, over and over and over again. And Moses is reminding them through these first 11 chapters, you didn't do anything. In fact, every time you got involved, you just screwed it up. You only served to mess up the thing that was happening. No, man, at every turn, I've been the one involved in doing and serving and moving you towards the thing. It's not the strength of your own hand. But you should remember the Lord your God, for it is he who is giving you the power to make wealth, that he may confirm his covenant, which he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. I think we see this amazingly practical lesson from this section. It wasn't in the wilderness that mankind first rejected God, was it? Think back, week 1 of this series. Where's man at? Dude, he was in a garden that sounded an awful lot like this land of promise that they're getting ready to come into. Right? Dude, things were going well. They weren't in the wilderness. They weren't without food. They weren't without God's blessing and provision and life. Dude, they were in God's presence. Things were going well. We've seen through Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers how we're tempted to make our own way when things are going poorly, and yet we must not forget that we are equally tempted to reject God's law when things are going well. We can become convinced that our success and blessing is due to our own work and wisdom, and I think God is giving us this cautionary warning to be on guard for this mentality when life is going well. Do not be tempted to worship blessing and prosperity over the God who gives them. By tempted to find themselves in that position. Dude, things go well, and pretty soon I can be convinced that I'm the one who made them go well. And then if that's true, then it's on me to keep things going well. And then when they stop going well, all of a sudden now I've done something wrong or whatever the case is, and it's all of a sudden now I'm bearing a weight for something bro, you weren't even responsible for in the first place. You weren't responsible for getting this thing. Are you responsible now for losing it, right? Deuteronomy 12 through 26 is a reiteration of the laws given to Israel at Mount Sinai. You'll see statements like this throughout this section. Deuteronomy 13, 12 through 15, if you have your Bibles. It says, if you hear in one of your cities, which the Lord your God is giving you to live in, if you write in your Bible or highlight or underline, highlight that verse, right? Highlight that verse because that's different than something that we've seen before, right? But if you see some worthless men have gone out from among you and have seduced the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods, whom you have not known, then you shall investigate and search out and inquire thoroughly. If it is true and the matter established that is an abomination has been done among you, well, then you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it and all that is in it, cattle even, right, with the edge of the sword. Here's the deal. God has already given Israel commandments about idolatry. He said a lot about it, in fact. Like what does it look like to reject idolatry, to reject the worship of other gods, or to reduce the like God, the transcendent creator of the universe, down to some image available to you within creation, right? He's given them all sorts of commands. But this whole thing about like now, if you hear in one of your cities or in the land that God is giving you, you're going to see that all throughout the book of Deuteronomy as you guys get ready to read through that. And when you see that, know that God is expanding on and giving more details to the people as they come to possess this promised land. You guys tracking that? Everybody good? All right, chapter 27 through 34, and we'll be on our story overview. Deuteronomy details the blessing and curses that will come as a result of obedience to or rejection of God's law. Like, lest we forget, here's what your life looks like. Here's what life looks like. Life in the land. Here's what it all looks like if you trust in God's definition of good and evil and abide by these things. Right? And consequently, here's what it looks like if you don't. Right? And so he goes through and he spells all the stuff out. And this is a section we also get the election of new leaders. We see Joshua emerge as this new leader. Moses is taken up from the people up to the mountain, and he looks over into the promised land, and he dies. And then it's sort of the final preparations for entering the promised land. And you're left like waiting for the next story that's going to talk about next week, where they're like just ready to go, man. They're packed up, and they're fixing to head across into the land. And you're left with this question of like, are they going to obey? Like, they've seen all of these things. They've seen a generation of people reject God's law and find death. Or are they going to accept life as they trust God's definition for good and evil as they go into the land? And they're poised, man. They're like ready to go. We'll talk about that next week in the book of Joshua, right? So that's the story of Deuteronomy and the whole Torah. You guys doing okay? That's a lot. Like, a lot. If you haven't been taking notes, then you're going to forget about 85% of that before you stick your keys into your ignition here in just a few minutes, right? Just as a side note, the reason we've been giving you notes isn't just so that you'll remember. The reason we've been giving you notes is that by the end of this year, if you keep up with all of these notes, the next time you open up the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, whatever, and you begin to read, man, open up those notes and let that be like the lens or the filter through which you read the book, right? We've been kind of taking this overarching or thematic view of all of these different books and what's called a Bible survey. You ever heard of a Bible survey before? That's what we're doing. We're doing a year-long survey through the entire Bible, man. And at the end of this, you're going to have about a 150-page Bible survey that's going to allow you to have this lens for each one of these books that you're looking through, right? But here's the deal. I just covered like 2,000 years of history, 600 commands, and some very large theological concepts. And it's a lot. And God knows that it's a lot as well. In knowing that it is a lot and that we are a forgetful people, God does something amazing, and He simplifies everything down to one easy-to-remember statement, right? And that's where I want to zoom in the book of Deuteronomy today. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6. We're going to begin reading there here in just a second. All right, before we do that, I want to talk about our study concept for just a second. If you remember, our study concepts are those things that like help you know how to read the Bible for yourself, right? Man, Bible literacy is a huge thing. I said that most people don't know how to read, and not that I say that meaning you're illiterate. I say that meaning reading is a very active and involved process. It's searching, it's backwards and forwards and following the little hyperlinks that point to other places in the Bible and watching how all of the stories sort of coalesce together to tell one unified story that leads our eyes to Jesus, right? Reading is a very active activity. And so what we're doing through the study concept is giving you the tools to read for yourself, right? So we've talked about a few different ones, but this morning I want to talk about word studies. Who has done a word study in here before? Anybody done like a biblical word study? A few of you guys. Who is like that? The thought of that terrifies you doing a word study, like totally. Okay, so here's the deal. I want to make this more accessible because you are absolutely capable of doing a Bible word study, right? And here's the deal. This is the purpose of a word study. The purpose of a word study is to try to properly understand a word's usage and meaning within its biblical context. What defines a word? Anybody want to answer that? What defines a word? Is it the dictionary? Who thinks it's the dictionary? That's how we use it, right? It's usage, man. Actually, the dictionary is based off of how we use words, and the dictionary changes all the time because our usage of word changes. And here's the deal. We're reading languages that are like thousands of years old. Anybody speak or read Hebrew and Greek in here? Yeah, okay. I didn't think so. And so these are foreign language, foreign cultures, and things that like do words that we just don't get, right? So our goal and our job is to sort of understand that. And much like the study of like genre, I introduced that to you guys last week. I talked about we have to be careful how we read different types of literature. It's like a newspaper, right? The Bible's a lot like a newspaper, man. You have the front page news stories, that's page one, but you may also have like help wanted ads or something in the back, or you may have comics. And here's a good illustration, right? Is the comics maybe any less truthful than the story that's going on in the front page? In fact, it may be more truthful a lot of times, right? But the way in which it conveys this truth is way different than the way that the story on the front page conveys the truth. You guys track what I'm saying? So we said we're going to revisit genre every time we come to a new type of literature in the Bible, and it's going to work the same way with our word study, right? So today I want to talk about something called the semantic domain. You guys good with that? I know this sounds really like school, I don't know, but I promise I'll make it good. All right. How do you define the word run? How do you define the word? Let's talk it through in English real quick before we try to tackle another language. How do you define the word run? Walking but quicker. I love that. Putting one foot in front of the other. Let's call this one walking but quicker. All right. Is that the only way that you can define the word run, though? No, you can run a business, right? That's actually a lot more about leadership than it is like walking but quicker, right? But it's still run, right? It's still run. And then you can you can run your groceries home. Does that mean that I'm going to literally take my groceries in hand and then run to my house with them? No, it does not mean that, does it? It means, right, that it's maybe a trivial task. It's one that I'm going to do quickly. It's necessary, yet it's not a big deal, right? I'm just going to run them home in the way that we would say that. You can run your mouth. That's another one. Everybody like that one? You can run your mouth. And that carries with it sort of a negative, possibly critical connotation to the word run. So that's one way you can do it. But let's talk even within running is movement, right? Because that's the one that I think we most think of. Running in movement. That's still not simple, is it? That actually, there's a lot that goes into that. You can run for exercise, and maybe that conjures up images of workout gear, or I don't know, AirPods or something, right? But so there's that type of run. But you can run from something too, can't you? You can run from a bear. I hope you don't run from a bear because they're going to catch you, right? But you run from a bear, and that carries a sense of danger to it, but also innocence. And here's why I say innocence, because you can also run from the cops, and that is danger as well, right? That's danger, but maybe not innocence, is it? And so you guys see what I'm saying. So that's what's known as the semantic domain, because all of these things make up what we understand to be run. You guys good? You guys tracking with that, right? I know this is like school stuff, but stay with me, right? A word's semantic domain is the broad range of meanings that a single word can possess. Are you tracking? Tracking with that? Broad range of meanings. So that's semantic domain, but a sense, also known, if you guys want to learn a really cool theological word, a lemma, is a particular meaning that a word carries in the sentence that you're reading. Right? If I say I'm gonna run to the gym, well, does that mean I'm running from the cops to the gym? No, I think you would understand that it just means I'm going to the gym after work today, or something like that, right? So we don't use the full sense. We don't use all the different meanings of run every time we do that. No, we pick one sense or one lemma out of that whole semantic domain, and we do that. You guys good? Just tracking? I know that was maybe an overly complex way to explain something really simple, but we have to know this, right? Because those two words, sense and semantic domain, if you start to do a Bible word study, you're going to see things that help categorize information in that way. You're gonna open up lexicons, which are just a fancy word for dictionaries, and it's gonna have the semantic domain of this word, and it's gonna list all these different ways in which this word is to be understood and known, right? And then as you maybe use a concordance, it's gonna drive in on a particular verse, and it's gonna give you the particular sense or lemma of that particular word. You guys track what I'm saying? You gotta be aware of both of those, and you may be like, dude, I don't know how to even find that stuff. Here's the deal: we live in the 21st century. We are the most digitally, technologically advanced culture that has ever existed on this planet. Biblical illiteracy is a choice at this point in human history, right? And y'all, I think that as people who love Jesus or want to follow after Jesus and know Jesus and understand His Word, I think this is a big part of coming to do that, is actually understanding the words of the Bible, right? And so here's the deal. We have some software that we pay for here at the church called Logos. Ask me for it. It's free. It's like a $500 package that we have bought for all of you. We didn't pay that much money, but it's a package we bought for all of you that you can access this stuff instantly on your phone. And there's other apps and dictionaries and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I trust that you're able to take this information and sort of apply it. So I think the best way to see this is to just dive into our passage for today and let's see it at work. You guys good? Here we go. Deuteronomy 6, 4-5. We all made it through that and nobody died, man. I was worried that somebody might literally die in the middle of that. Semantic domains and lemmas. I almost died when it was explained to me the first time. But he didn't do it with Legos. So anyways, all right, Deuteronomy 6, 4-5. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Deuteronomy 6, 4-5 is what's known as the Shema. Everybody say Shema. Shema, right? And was a prayer that was repeated 2 to 3 times a day by all Israelites. And the Shema gets its name from the very first word of the prayer, hear. Hear, O Israel. Man, they're really getting wound up back there. Hear, O Israel. So Shema, O Israel. And so it gets its word from that, or it gets its name from that first word, right? Here's it. Let's think about semantic domain for just a second. What can hearing refer to? Well, hearing can refer to the physical act of mentally decoding sound waves as they enter into your head, right? Fancy way of just saying hearing, right? Hearing can also refer to understanding something. Ask my kids, hey, do you hear me? That means not did you mentally decode the sound waves that came into your head, but do you understand, and do you understand the consequences of not understanding, right? That's one way to talk about it. And here's why the concept of word study is so important, because actually, man, in Hebrew, it can mean something beyond what it means in English. And this is why word studies are so important, because we have this semantic domain of all the ways that when we think about hearing, this is what we think of, right? And I could list off probably a dozen different ways in which we understand hearing. But for Hebrew, there is an extra one that we don't have. And this is why we do word studies. And so I'll show you how the process works. Let's find somewhere else that uses the word Shema. So if you have your Bibles, Exodus chapter 19. Exodus 19:5. It says, now then, if you have your pen or highlighter, highlight this, right? Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. Sounds like language that could have come out of Deuteronomy, right? But here's the deal. You will indeed obey, those 4 words, my voice, and keep my covenant. There's 5 words, 5 separate, different English words there. Guess what? In Hebrew, it's not. It's all one word. If you will Shema my voice, and Shema my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples of the earth. Hebrew does not have a separate word for hear and then respond to in obedience. The assumption is that if you truly understand, if you truly hear, then you will obey. And we see Jesus over and over again. He makes this statement. And tell me if you guys have heard this before. Matthew 13:9. He says this. He says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. I always thought that was Is that like some catchy rhyme to just close things out for him? Or what was the case? No, he's carrying over this idea. So Jesus is there and he's explaining to this group of followers, like, what does it mean? Like, this is the parable of the sower. What does it mean to like hear God's word and then rightly respond to it? And so he closes out that parable by saying, well, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And his disciples ask him, like, why? Like, okay, we got some questions about that parable, but why do you speak in parables? And listen to what Jesus says. This is just a little further down, 13 through 16, Matthew chapter 13, right? He says, therefore I speak to them in parables, because while seeing, they do not see, while hearing, they do not hear, nor do they understand. In their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is being fulfilled, which says, you will keep on hearing, but will not understand. You will keep on seeing, but you will not perceive. For the heart of the people has become dull. With their ears they scarcely hear, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise they would see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and return, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, your ears because they hear. Jesus was repeating Isaiah's words from a time when Israel was actually doing all of the right things, but they didn't have the right spirit as they did it. God says, stop bringing your sacrifices. Like, dude, I'm sick of smelling it. Like, I don't want to see you in my temple, because even though you're doing all the right things, man, like your heart and the reason why you're doing things are so far away from what I've commanded you. You've not truly understood or heard like the heart of my law, just to love me. You're doing these things out of like some moral obligation or out of a checklist of like things to do, right? He says, no, man, like, if you have ears to hear, hear. And here's what Jesus says. This is how he closes this whole thing out. And as he explains through what the different soils and the seed and all these things, what it all means, this is how he closes it out. Matthew 13:23. And the one on whom seed was sown on the good soil, this man who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and brings forth some 100-fold, some 60, and some 30. Did y'all catch Shema at play here? Right? This is the man who hears the word and understands it. That's Shema, hear. And who indeed bears fruit. That's Shema, action, response. So let's look back at our text real quick. Deuteronomy 6:4-5. Now, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and with all your might. Jesus was once asked to reduce the entire law down to one easy thing. This is what he does. He points back. What's the greatest commandment? This lawyer asked Jesus. And he does the exact same thing that God had done. He's like, well, actually, God's already done that for you in the book of Deuteronomy. If you read your Bible, then you know that in Deuteronomy, God took and reduced the entire law down to one easy to remember thing. And so Jesus, when he answers the lawyer, he gives them the Shema. He repeats it to them. If you know that story, he repeats the Shema to these people. These two verses somehow incorporate the entire law. That is to say, every command, every character, every storyline, theological concept, ritual, and even the architecture, right, is summed up and kept by keeping this one command. Let's say it another way. If you're committed to the Shema, you will keep the law. So somehow, we have to hear and understand and respond to the fact that the Lord is our God and the Lord is one. So this would be the point in our study, if you were doing a word study, where you would come to that next big word, L-O-R-D, and you would stop and do a word study there. But good thing for us, right? A little bit of foresight. Like, we thought ahead, and we did that week 3 of this study. You guys remember that in the book of Exodus. We actually did an extensive word study about this word, Lord. I told you guys the story of the burning bush. And what's amazing about the story of the burning bush isn't that the bush is burning and yet not consumed. What's amazing about the burning bush story is that it actually, God introduces himself to us. God gives us his name by which we may know him and know who he is. And who he is I am. God's name, that L-O-R-D, means I will be who I will be. We don't call him that. We say he will be who he will be. And who he will be is he will be the transcendent creator of the universe who stands outside of everything. He's the one who defines good and evil for us. Do we understand that? Lord means that he stands transcendent above our sin and its consequences as the only power strong enough to rescue us from them. That's the story that he was making through Exodus, right? That's the point he was making through Exodus. Through the Torah, we've also seen that he's the one who rescues us, not based off of what we've done, but because of his own mercy and his own grace. Moses just spent 11 chapters showing us how the Lord, capital L-O-R-D, has disciplined his people over the course of their road trip. It's in Numbers. The New Testament says that God disciplines those whom he loves. In fact, there may be no higher expression of love than discipline. It takes real love to allow hardship in the lives of those you love to produce something greater in them. And the Shema is asking us to understand who God is, what he has done, and how deeply he loves and is devoted to us, and then respond in light of that. That may seem like a really simple concept, but we have to stop and actually grasp hold of this for just a second. Oh yeah, bro, we got plenty of time here. We actually need to grasp a hold of this for just a second, right? Because this is what separates Christianity from all other religions on the earth. It's what separates followers of Jesus from every other conceived of thing in the entire world, right? And here it is. Our obedience is not based on an obligation to a list of rules, but out of love for the one who first loved us. Look at me really closely. Every other single man-made religion has at its roots a type of adherence to a set of rules as the ways in which you find favor with some higher power. Given that we're inclined to see the law already, I started with this. We're already inclined to see the law as just a set of rules. Right? Remember that? 613 of them. It's easy to be convinced that Genesis through Deuteronomy is just a list of rules. Actually, though, it's a story about how God loves his people and is working in their lives to shape them into a people of faithfulness who will find life as they submit to him and his definitions of good and evil. And we do that because we've seen who he is and how much he actually loves us. All of the religion, for Islam, it's 5 pillars, right? Mormonism, it's moral conduct, attendance at temple, it's mission, right? I'm not disparaging anyone, but these are the basic roots and tenets of different religions. For Hindu, it's meditation. Even for systems, listen to this, man, even for systems that have no perceived higher power. I'm talking atheism, agnosticism, or even secular humanism. There is this list of cosmic or scientific rules that must be kept if we're to live consistently within the closed system of which we are a part of and dependent on. Are you tracking that? That was a lot. It went really fast, right? The universe and the world works a certain way, and if we're going to continue to find life and have life within this system, man, we have to act consistently within the laws of this system. So we must do X, Y, and Z. And maybe that's things around climate change, or maybe that's things about social justice, or whatever the case is. But there's this list of rules and this list of things that we have to adhere to if we're going to live consistently and rightly within the system of which we are part of. Even without God, we still put ourselves in this sort of bondage, man. Not followers of Jesus, though. I did this a few weeks ago, but I think it bears repeating. I love my wife, right? I told you guys this. I think flowers are silly. They die and cost a lot of money. And honestly, a candle smells better, right? So for me, a very practical dude mind, I think about flowers and I'm like, dude, flowers are whatever, right? But here's the deal. We have some aging flowers at our house right now, right? I think they're getting a little crispy at this point, but we pretty much keep flowers at our house. I buy my wife flowers all the time. That isn't to say something to be oh, look at me or whatever, but that's no, I buy flowers for my wife, not out of obligation to some husband law or something that's hey, you must buy your wife flowers, right? No. I buy my wife flowers because I love my wife. And I don't want to give her flowers out of an expression and an overflow of my love and affection for her. Y'all, is it work? Does it feel like I'm keeping a command when I buy my wife flowers? No. I think flowers are stupid, but I still get excited when I go to the farmer's market on Saturday morning and I see a bouquet that I know she's going to love, and it's like, oh, it's $10, So I grab that thing, man, and I love to do that. Even though for me, it's like, could care less about flowers. It's not like keeping a checklist of things, man. It's like, at that point, is it really even obedience at that point? See, the Torah, the law, is not a set of rules that we keep, but a story about a creator who deeply loves us. Those list of rules that we do find in the law it's like that conversation with my wife when she told me, early on in our marriage, she was like, hey, I like flowers. I'm like, oh, click, let's lock that away, right? It's like that list of rules isn't there as like, I don't know, man. It's not a thing that we make a checklist out of and we say, all right, we do this, we do this, we do this. Because, man, I just told you about a time in Israel's history under Isaiah where they were doing it. They had made the checklist. They were doing all the sacrifice. They were doing all the things. And yet they missed it because it wasn't rooted in their love for Him. And it became oppressive. By the time of Jesus, we had erected entire systems of religion just around that, man. And it was oppressive. It was Pharisee. It was legalism. Dude, and that is damaging. This is where we have to look at our picture of Christ in the gospel. Now, I don't mean just in the book of Deuteronomy. I mean in the whole Torah. Because here's the deal. Jesus came to keep all the rules that we've broken. Only Jesus truly loved God and kept His law. Over and over again in the New Testament, Jesus shows His power over creation. Jesus shows how He is pure. How Jesus was the better high priest. Jesus was the perfect sacrifice. Jesus was the better Moses and the better Abraham. Jesus was the one that the Joseph narrative was pointing to. Jesus sets Himself up as the true Israel and the God who led them. At every point in the life of Jesus, He is fulfilling the law that we have failed to. John chapter 1 tells us that Jesus was the tabernacle. As He come, representing God's presence here on earth, as He dwelled with us. You know what it uses? It uses the word tabernacle. That Jesus came to tabernacle with us. God's presence on earth. Not only that, but Jesus represents the totality of mankind's sin and rebellion before God. Jesus paid the price for our sin that we owed. And finally, Jesus, being the firstborn from the dead, was resurrected to the life. The true life that God promises to all who will follow Him. Jesus has promised to share that life with all who will follow Him. You see, man, while our hearts are constantly inclined to love other things more than God, Jesus loved the Father perfectly. Jesus is the perfect embodiment of the love for God and obedience to the law. And it's through Jesus that we now relate to the law. I showed you guys in the book of Leviticus, man, why I don't end every service sacrificing a goat up here on stage, right? Honestly, man, I try to think about how to close all of this out. I had a really hard time. And so I'm just going to let Jesus close it out. John chapter 14, Jesus is just finished the Last Supper, and He is about to walk up to the hill, Garden of Gethsemane, where He's going to be arrested and crucified from there just a few hours later. And He's given His disciples these final instructions. He tells them, I'm about to go away. I'm leaving you. They freak out, understandably, right? Well, where are you going? So I'm going to the Father. You can't follow me there yet. And one of His disciples asked this question. He says, well, show us the Father. Show us where you're going. John 14, verse 7 picks it up. And Jesus says, if you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know Him. Know that as you have seen me, you have known the Father. Philip said to Him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. And Jesus said, oh, Philip, how long have I been with you, and yet you've not come to know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak of my own initiative, but the Father abiding in me does His work. In fact, everything that I've done, Philip, everything that I've done has been because I love the Father and I want to obey the Father. If you've known me, then you've known the love that the Father has for you. You've known what it looks like to follow after the Father in obedience because you've seen me do it, and I've called you to do the same. But believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Otherwise, just believe because of what you've seen. Believe because of the works themselves. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also, and greater works than these he will do, because I go to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, that will I do, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it. And listen to how he closes it. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. Did Jesus abolish the law? No, man, not at all. We answered that question. I already told you back in Leviticus, right? It's just that we now relate to the law through Jesus. Jesus is our purity, our high priest, and our perfect atoning sacrifice. We follow the law because we love God. And we love God because of how He first loved us. And God first loved us by coming as the man named Jesus and fulfilling the law on our behalf and taking the punishment we deserve for all the ways that we have broken the Torah. So I believe our response to the whole Torah, all the commands, the history, the character, storyline, theology, rituals, and even the architecture can be summed up in one imperative question. And I think we all have to answer it. Will you respond to the love of Jesus displayed for you on the cross by submitting to Him as ruler of your life? Will you accept His definitions of good and evil? I don't know where you're at. I don't know where you walked in here at in those terms. Maybe this is the first time you're hearing this, and maybe it would be your first response. But here's the deal, man. Just like those Israelites in the wilderness for 40 years, it's also a process that gets worked out over a lifetime of faithfulness and failure, and learning and readjusting and reorienting our lives back to Him. So I don't know where you're at, but I know that every single one of us in here has to answer that question and has to continually be grappling with that question and its implications. I would love to have that conversation with you. Yeah, that's the Book of Deuteronomy. That's Torah. You guys good? You guys good? All right, that was a lot. I know. It was a lot. Let me pray and we'll close it out. God, we love you and we praise you. We thank you for all that you've done for us. Thank you for bringing us in here this week. God, we thank you for the opportunity to worship you freely. Thank you that you've not hidden yourselves from us, but you revealed yourself at every turn in your word, God, that we might know you and find life. I pray that we would read our Bibles with open eyes and open ears as we seek to hear and respond and obey. Not out of obligation or duty, but because we love you. Father, I pray that you would keep us and bring us back this next week as we serve you, look for opportunities to display that same love to others. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, you guys have a good week. Only like 2 minutes.